Hi, welcome everybody. We're here today as part of our continuing conversation about the Ike Dike, and that's a conversation about the future of our region and our coast. If you could add your name and location to the chat in any groups you're representing today, I'd appreciate it. My name is Kristen Schlemmer. I'm the legal director and Waterkeeper for Bayou City Waterkeeper, and I'm based here in Houston. Just in terms of folks who registered today, we saw names associated with Surfrider, Save Buffalo Bayou, Marine Mammal Stranding Network, the Sierra Club, People, Property Rights, and the Nature Conservancy, as well as Sally Bacco and Lori Treweek from the Gulf Coast Protection District, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. Before we begin, I just want you to save the date. September 17th will be our next meeting like this. And we'll get to learn more about the different projects and different aspects of Ike Dike and our broader coastal resilience. So today we're going to hear more about the key entities and officials with decision-making power over some aspect of our coast, our climate resilience, our future. And we're going to hear from Danielle Goshen, who many of you saw a couple weeks ago at our virtual community forum. Danielle is a policy specialist and counsel at National Wildlife Federation here in Texas. And she has expertise in prioritizing investments that work with nature to protect the people most at risk from flooding and climate change. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle now. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Kristen. As Kristen said, I just want to go through the key decision makers that are making decisions about the Coastal Texas study. And my goal is to really highlight specific opportunities where you can provide input and really raise questions and concerns about this project. So to start off, I want to go through and talk about the federal process. Often on a biennial schedule, Congress considers a Water Resources and Development Act bill, or a WRDA bill. WRDA bills authorize, among other things, Army Corps studies, and it also authorizes projects for construction. WRDA bills, importantly, do not include appropriations, which are generally addressed in the federal budget process. And also note that if something is authorized for construction under a WRDA bill, that does not necessarily lead to a corresponding appropriations for the project. Many projects are actually still awaiting authorization, or sorry, appropriations. So there's a current construction backlog for Army Corps projects estimated to be around $100 billion. So earlier this month, WRDA, that includes the Coastal Texas study, was passed in our US House. I want to pause and say, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Or if there's something super pressing, feel free to raise your hand and I can pause and we can address something along the way. I don't need to just talk straight at you guys for the whole time. So as I was saying, right now there's a WRDA bill under consideration at the federal level. And WRDA bills, while they do authorize projects for construction and studies, they do not include appropriations. They do not include federal money for those projects. Those are addressed generally in the federal budget process. And if something is approved for construction under a WRDA bill, it doesn't necessarily mean that appropriations will follow. There are many projects under previous WRDAs that are currently sitting in an Army Corps backlog. There's about $100 billion worth of projects that are currently under that construction backlog at the Corps. So earlier this month, a WRDA bill was passed in the House, and there's a Senate version that was introduced in April and approved 5 days later by the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. However, it has not held a vote on the Senate floor yet. So that's where things lie at the federal level. It's important to note that there's broad political support at the federal level for the Coastal Texas study. We tried to raise concerns at the federal level about the project and just to get questions asked in committee about it. However, we were unsuccessful in getting questions raised. And yeah, so we believe that this will move forward at the federal level through WRDA, and it will be authorized for construction. However, while you can always contact your senators about this project and raise concerns, we don't think that's probably the best use of time right now. There might be more opportunities under the appropriations, making a fiscal argument about a 65% federal cost share for a $31 billion project. That's a lot of money, especially right now. So there might be better opportunities at the federal level waiting for appropriations. Now, the Army Corps and the GLO are the next decision makers that I want to talk about. WRDA in 2007 authorized the Army Corps to develop a comprehensive plan looking at the feasibility of flood damage reduction, hurricane and storm surge reduction, and ecosystem restoration along the coastal Texas area. And this later turned into the Coastal Texas Study. That study was then funded in 2014, and in 2015, the GLO was officially designated as the non-federal sponsor. The GLO works with the Army Corps to, they're really responsible for the management of coastal public lands and implementation of different federal and state statutes. And they also authorize or operate various coastal programs. As a non-federal sponsor, the GLO contributes both funding and in-kind and contracted services to the Army Corps to support the development and completion of the Coastal Texas Study. They only agreed to be this non-federal sponsor of the feasibility study alone. They're not the non-federal sponsor of the project moving forward after the study is completed. Now, the Army Corps has served as the lead flood control agency at the federal level since 1917. And they have been tasked with studying and constructing water resources projects related to flood risk reduction. The Coastal Texas Study was led by the Galveston district of the Army Corps. Now, as I noted, the WRDA study authorization really tasked the Army Corps to look at flood damage reduction and hurricane storm and other components of flooding besides storm surge, but they really just ran with the storm surge component and ignored flood risk reductions due to urban stormwater drainage failures and pluvial and fluvial flooding. So they really kind of narrowed the scope of what they did study. The next opportunity to really engage with these decision makers will likely be when the Army Corps has to undergo the environmental impact statements for all of the non-actionable items that are currently included in the Coastal Texas Study. This means all of the major bayside and Gulf side defenses, all of this coastal storm surge reduction measures that the Coastal Texas Study plan is known for. None of those items are actionable because they have not completed all of the NEPA requirements. They're asking for money now, and they're saying we will inform you about all of the impacts and how we're going to mitigate for those after we get money. So there's a bit of a timing issue that we see on from our side. But they have to undergo those environmental impact statements for all of those major bayside and Gulf side defenses. So there will be public comment opportunities down the line, likely after they already receive money for this project. So we will absolutely let everybody know about those opportunities if this project does move forward. Now moving on, the next player is the Gulf Coast Protection District. They are a taxing authority that was created under the 87th regular legislation in 2021 under SB 1160. They are, largely seen as cheerleaders for the Coastal Texas Study. The GCPD is a 5-county taxing authority made up of Chambers County, Galveston County, Harris, Jefferson, and Orange counties. They are created to provide the authority to issue bonds, provide the authority to impose fees, impose a tax, use eminent domain, etc., to implement the coastal Texas study. 3 counties, oh, sorry, I didn't see. 3 counties within the coastal Texas study are within 3 counties within the GCPD's jurisdiction are within the project footprint of the coastal Texas study. That includes Chambers, Galveston, and Harris. 2 counties are largely outside the project footprint, and that includes Jefferson and Orange County. Brazoria was also initially listed as one of the counties under SB 1160, but was removed by Larry Taylor during the process, which is his district. And so those 5 counties right now will likely be the counties that are required to foot the local cost share, the 35% of $31 billion. And that number, that $31 billion, will likely increase over time. The Army Corps definitely has a track record of underestimating the costs associated. We all know about inflation that's going on right now and other supply chain issues that will likely raise the cost of this project moving forward. So right now, the GCPD does say that they are seeking alternative revenue streams, such as resilience bonds and state money, before considering local taxes. I don't know how likely that will be, however. I think that's pretty optimistic on their front. But the GCPD is made up of 11 directors. There is an executive director who I believe is not a voting member, and that's Nicole Sundstrom. And then the commissioner courts of the 5 counties were able to appoint 1 director each. In Chambers, that's Billy Combs. In Galveston, that's Roger Quiroga, which is also the secretary. In Harris County, that's Adrian Garcia from Precinct 2. In Jefferson, it's Alan B. Ritter, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. And then in Orange County, it's Kirk Roccaforte. And then the governor was able to appoint 6 members as well. Those appointees are, their term expires in 2025. From the governor appointed individuals, there's 2 directors to represent Harris County. And I believe, none of these are really explicitly stated, but I believe 2 of them are there's interests that have to be represented from the governor appointees, but it's hard to determine who's been appointed to which interest. So 2 directors must represent Harris County, and I believe those are Bob Mitchell and Michael Vandersnick. Bob Mitchell is also the vice president of GCPD. There's 1 director to represent municipalities, and I believe that's Sally Bacco. I think she was registered to attend this today as well. There is 1 director to represent the ports, and that is, I believe, Roger Gunther. And then 1 to represent industry, which I believe is Michael Beckel. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. And he is the president. And then lastly, 1 to represent environmental concerns, and that is Lori Trawick, who I believe is here today as well. So there's many powers and authorities that this district has, as I kind of recently stated, that were outlined under SB 1160. However, if they wish to impose an ad valorem tax, they must hold an election in a manner provided by the Water Code to obtain voter approval for that tax increase. That tax increase, their authority only goes up to 5 cents for each $100 in valuation. And I found this was pretty interesting. There's a Houston Chronicle article yesterday talking about a potential new bond that will go to voters, I guess, in August. And that article, and it's for parks and flood control and other things, and that would be a $1 billion flood bond. And that article said that to pay debt service on the bonds, the measure would result in a property tax increase of 1 penny per $100 of assessed value. And if there's a 25-year period payoff, that would mean a $27 tax increase for a homeowner of a $348,000 home with 20% homestead exemption. Now, if we times this by 5, which is the maximum amount that GCPD can tax, that would mean about $135 increase just for the local cost share in Harris County. It's important to keep in mind, this is not for a Hurricane Harvey event. This is for a storm surge coming up the Houston Ship Channel. This would not resolve drainage issues in the city, which are in desperate need of upgrades in many areas and repair. This $135 tax increase would not address that. It's also important to know that that is just the 35% cost share for the $31 billion. The GCPD is also required to pay 100% of the operation, maintenance, repair, and rehabilitation costs for the project. That could be a lot of money, especially if there are storms that are in excess of what the Coastal Texas study is designed for. If they have to close the gates more, that's going to cost more. If they have to do more maintenance because of sediment that's building up, that's going to cost more. So we really don't have a good idea right now of how much those operation and maintenance costs will be moving forward. So the GCPD holds monthly meetings, and we would love for more members of the public to attend those meetings. Their June meeting is canceled, but they will be reconvening on July 15th. We've been really urging the GCPD to hold virtual options for public members to attend, or anybody to attend, especially during COVID, and especially because it's a 5-county taxing authority. And right now on their website, they do indicate that there is going to be a virtual option for the July meeting. So I haven't seen a Zoom link for that yet, but if it's out there, that would be really exciting. And hopefully that could just increase access to these meetings where a lot of decisions are being made, a lot of presentations are being provided. And these meetings have been largely attended, but they've been largely attended by industry consultants, and members of the public rarely attend, and if at all, and they're usually at the request of people that are running this meeting here today. We're just trying to reach out to anyone that can go and take notes and provide it to us. So if you're interested in attending those meetings and sharing notes, we would love to hear from you. Just raising more questions as these decision makers are sharing information in not the most accessible way. It would be huge to have those questions asked. Lastly, I just want to talk about Harris County real quick. Harris County, of course, is one of the 5 counties that will be on the hook for the local cost share. And they also represent 3 members of the GCPD. Harris County will likely be taxed the most due to its tax base and population. And this is all, again, for a project that will not protect Harris County from a Hurricane Harvey. So one really concerning thing about what we've seen from Harris County is that there hasn't been a lot of education to the public about what this project is. We have also heard from Commissioner's Court that there's a concern that really talking about alternatives that are faster, quicker, cheaper, etc., will signal that they don't want the Coastal Texas study. And they do not want to leave money on the table. That is very concerning. We absolutely need to protect communities now if they're at risk, or the communities are at risk, and we need to protect them now. We need to find alternatives that can be implemented on a quicker and cheaper timescale. So we need to be doing all that we can to study and develop alternatives that are suitable for the short term and the medium term. This Coastal Texas study is not a done deal. We can't just be waiting around for it to come. And even if it does, it's not a silver bullet anyways. We need to be really looking at holistic flood mitigation and flood protection in the region. This includes things like identifying industrial facilities that pose the greatest risk to communities and making sure that they are not allowed to pose a risk to neighboring communities. We need to invest in non-structural solutions. We need to not develop in areas that are at the greatest risk. We need to invest in elevating homes and really protecting them from wind damage and other types of damage that can occur during these large storms. And finally, looking at nature-based solutions, working with nature to allow water to store and soak and spread across the landscape in a way that's not harmful to communities, instead of rushing it downstream as quickly as possible that can induce flooding elsewhere. So those are the main players that are involved in the Coastal Texas study. We really want everybody's voices to be heard from the region, especially those communities that are most at risk and the communities that are going to be asked to pay for this. So yeah, we would love to hear what your thoughts are about this project, what other information you are wanting to learn about this Coastal Texas study. And yeah, with that, I will turn it back to Kristen.
Thanks so much, Danielle. We have about 5 minutes left. So I guess I first want to just ask if anyone has any questions, and you can either come off mute and share them, or you can put them in the chat. And if you want to follow this work or sign up to be a note taker or anything else, volunteer in any other way, I put a form in the chat where you can sign up, and we'll follow up with you. And for those of you who already signed up at our last meeting, I'll be following up soon. And let's see, what else? Yeah, and I think one thing Danielle said too, we are going to have another meeting on September 17th. So if there's, the topic for that meeting is something we're still deciding. And so if you have something that you'd really like for us to cover in that meeting or in a future meeting, go ahead and drop that in the chat, or feel free to email us and suggest topics too.
Danielle, hi. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about the choice to do like storm surge protection over flood risk reduction. Can you talk a little bit about that like trade-off?
Yeah,
I just always find it helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're talking about the trade-off that the Army Corps made, unfortunately, we don't have a good record on why they limited the project scope. We think that they limited the project scope from, this kind of comprehensive flood risk reduction study that we think was envisioned by the 2007 WRDA bill to just storm surge. We think they did that kind of improperly, and they didn't provide reasoning for why they went from language that encompasses multiple types of flooding just to storm surge reduction. But that's what they did. And I can't give you a good, yeah. I think I have heard though, that, they believe that Harris County Flood Control District and other authorities have everything else covered, that there's already enough, and so, yeah, John, I see. So anybody living in Houston just can laugh at that, but it's, yeah, that's the reasoning that I've heard.
So I wanted to make a point about, with the gas situation, there's a lot of pressure for the Gulf of Mexico offshore rigs to they want more wells out there. And so if that were to happen, where all that refining is going to be done, right here in our area. So there's going to be a lot more pressure for this structure, so that's Surfrider's new campaign is, what we say about the proposed new offshore wells. So just keep that in your mind.
Absolutely, and that is a very clearly signaled driver for this. It's national security for all of the petrochemical industries up along the Houston Ship Channel. They want all taxpayers to pay for this, while not putting the onus on industries to protect communities and still allowing development as usual in the area. So that's very concerning. And even if this is built, it's still not a silver bullet. We have to be thinking about where these facilities are going, which communities are impacted. Yeah, that's very concerning. Good point, Jeff.
If I would, I'd like to make just a little comment. Danielle, I think you've correctly identified the upcoming issues. And I just think that, right now, there's a lot of political support for doing something from both sides of the aisle. That gets tougher and tougher as money has to be spent and taxes have to be raised. As Danielle pointed out, the thing that could change all that, and there's a likelihood of it happening, is that there could be another storm. And when that happens, the momentum will really grow, including spending the money. So that's something we have to keep in mind. This is a long process, and there's a pretty good odds we're going to have another storm before this gets anywhere near a fruition.
Absolutely, great point. And there's expedited NEPA procedures when that happens as well. So that's very concerning. But it is something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
And we are at time now. So I want to say thank you to everyone. If you have any questions that kind of pop into your brain that you want to send us by email, feel free to do that. I'll put my email in the chat. And then when we send follow-up from this meeting, we can answer those there. But thank you so much for coming. I think all of y'all raised really great points. And I think just maybe to close, in terms of even just the feasibility and getting approval of this project, I was in DC last week and ended up speaking with folks from New York who kind of looked at a similar proposal for their coast, and it eventually didn't move forward because the cost estimate got up to $98 billion. And they realized if we're going to spend that level of money, what else can we do, and what can we do on a faster timeline? And I think those are some of the questions that are being answered here too. Especially as the cost of this project continues to increase, at least on the ground level, from what I'm hearing from folks. So thank you so much. We'll be in touch, and I hope everyone has a great summer, and we'll see you hopefully on the other side of what will be a gentle hurricane season, knock on wood.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.